it's Mary, and today I'm trying to film a very quick video because I'm trying to squeeze in time for filming during the week, although it's very hard. But I didn't read a lot in actually March and April, so I thought I could do it since I don't have a lot of books to talk about. And as I said in my previous sort of currently reading chat video, I haven't been reading much because I have been very tired. I'm pregnant with my second child, so I've been super tired in the evening, which is usually when I read. And plus the smell of books sort of bothers me I know it's a sad thing because I love how books smell, but having that smell wafting towards me was very sort of intense and overwhelming, and so yeah, that's why I haven't been reading that much these past sort of 2 months. But without further ado, let's talk about the books that I did read in no particular order, although I do think that they are roughly in the order in which I read them. First, we have Discourse on Colonialism, and also my version of it has the Discourse on Negritude too by Aimé Césaire, and I have an Italian translation. So this text was originally written in French, and I'm going to put in the English translation here. And this was an amazing book. I give it 5 stars. It was absolutely perfect, but also very infuriating and thought-provoking. And even though this text was written in 1955, I feel it's still so relevant. And obviously it talks about colonialism, and it calls out all the bullshit that white people bring up whenever they try to justify colonialism in some way. And he does that in a very elegant but also very biting way, and sometimes he's even sarcastic, and you can tell that he knows very well how to use language. He's also a poet, and you can really feel it when you're reading the book. Something that really was relevant to me is how we sort of are preoccupied with like fascism, and how Hitler was, you know, the bad guy, but we never give the same weight to colonialism and what and the implications that are still going on in present days. So I thought even in school, and I know that's probably a little bit different for every country, but even in school we would stress a lot on fascism and how bad it was and how impactful, but we never treated colonialism in the same way, not even in a similar way. It's just mentioned as and also justified even in textbooks, which is very, as I said, enraging. Ultimately, I think everybody should read this book because it's extremely good, extremely well written, and also very easy and short to read, I might add. So yes, definitely check it out. Then we have another book by Daphne du Maurier that I'm slowly reading all the works of, and this is The Parasites. And I have to say, I've been feeling towards this sort of project, I'm not that pumped as I was in the beginning because, as I already mentioned, I did enjoy very much a couple of her books, maybe even 3 that I would give 5 stars to, and then all the other ones were sort of okay books, or just books that weren't books that I would have picked up otherwise, if it wasn't for the fact that they were written by Daphne du Maurier, and I think I DNF'd 1 or a couple, but this one, after a lot of 3 stars, because of course 3 stars are not bad books, but they're not great, and I don't feel like I sort of added anything to my reading experience when I read a 3-star book, to be honest. But this one for me was a 4-star book, and I wasn't expecting it from the premise. It didn't sound like something that would actually intrigue me that much. This was written in 49, but it is set in the 20s and 30s, and it revolves around 3 siblings, the Delanays, and they are, all 3 of them, connected to art in some form, and their parents are famous sort of people, because the mother was a dancer and the father a singer. The elder sister, I think she's the eldest, and she's called Maria, and she's an actress. Then we have Niall, who was a composer, and Celia that draws, but she's sort of set aside her art because her life is basically dedicated to tend to other people, especially the father. We are told the story from the perspective of all three of them, and actually the narrator is a weird sort of we that morphs into the different characters depending on which part of the story we're looking at, and they look back on their youth basically when they're not as young. I think they're in their 40s or 50s when they look back at their lives, and they just sort of tell their story basically. And it was very compelling and very interesting, even though the characters are not likable, as is in Daphne du Maurier's fashion. She really likes unlikable people, unlikable characters, and they, as the title suggests, they are referred as the parasites in the book, because they're all sort of spoiled and ungrateful in some sort of way. But their lives are very, as I said, compelling, and I really liked her writing style as usual, and how she used all the elements that she already uses in her books, like the sea, that is always present as if it was a character itself. But also the art and stage, that was very sort of prevalent in this one, and I am sort of stage kid, so I really loved all the references, and also music. She would quote a lot of music in this. Sometimes I would also know the melodies that she was referring to, or I would look them up on YouTube and then listen to the music while I was reading, and it was just such an enjoyable reading experience. I really ended up liking this one. It was not a 5-star read, but surely a well-deserved 4-star for me. Then we have Pew by Catherine Lacey, and I gave this book 3 stars. It wasn't as good as I was expecting it to be, and actually the more I distance myself from it, the less I find it resonating with me, the less it is relevant, and it sort of is slipping away from my memory, which is not really a good thing. But the premise of the book was actually super interesting, because this person is found at the church pew of this southern, very religious town. And the people of the town sort of want to help this person, and they try also to figure out what's the deal, because they don't understand whether Pew, which is the name that they give them, is a boy or a girl. Are they a young adult or a kid still? What is their race, and everything. The topics that the author brought to the plate were very interesting, but they weren't developed as cleverly. I think this felt more like a very stretched out short story. It's not really that nothing much is happening, but even the character of Pew didn't have this emotional depth that I was expecting them to have. It was a very dull, sort of flat character, and I couldn't feel any emotional attachment towards them. I couldn't feel, because I think it's clever. I mean, the fact that we cannot know, or we don't have answers in terms of their legacy. We don't even have an insight inside their mind, which I thought was way more interesting, and it would have been, more interesting to actually know something about them that would help us sort of not really give answers to the questions that this book poses, but just maybe start a new conversation, because I didn't feel like this book was adding anything in terms of race or gender or like stereotypes. It really didn't really dive deep into these things, so I felt like it fell flat for me, really. And that's a pity, because as I said, it was really like, even the writing style is good. There are some like nice passages, but I don't think ultimately was enough. It was enough for me. I don't think Pew was anything else that really a plot device to discuss things that aren't really discussed in the end. They're just, you know, brought to the surface and left them there. So yeah, 3 stars for me, but probably it's closer to a 2. But I'm feeling more generous this year towards the books that I'm reading. And we have a book by Kazuo Ishiguro, which I'm trying to read all the books of as well, because I read a couple of his books, or 2 or 3 of his books, and I really like both. I think it was 2, and I liked both of them. So I'm sort of making my way into his works too, and I picked up his debut novel, which was A Pale View of Hills. And again, this was a little bit of a disappointment. It is a 3-star read, so I don't feel like it's really that big of a disappointment. But it didn't deliver as the other books that I read by him did. I think, of course, I'm trying to be even sort of understanding of the fact that this is his first novel. Although I did, you know, arguably I read a lot of really great debut novels, so I can't really excuse him that much. I still could recognize a little bit of his like sort of writing style, but as well, I feel like in this one, we didn't have a lot of emotional depth inside the characters, and a lot of threads of the narration were left loose, really. This book is about Etsuko, and she's a Japanese woman who lives in England that used to live in Japan, in Nagasaki, after the war, and she has 2 daughters. One of them committed suicide, and that's basically how the book starts, and she sort of talks about how it was living in Japan back in that period, and the story revolves around her friendship with this Japanese woman that also had a daughter, and it sort of gets a bit dark and twisted, I would say, but I felt like sometimes the dialogue was a bit weird and stilted, and as I said, a lot of threads of the narration were not, I mean, it's not that I like a book that it's like well tied together at the end with a bow, and it's all, you know, clear and bright, but I just feel like there weren't enough elements to this book to make it like a great story, especially on the emotional level. So yeah, it was interesting. It was very short to read, so definitely, like, if it feels like, if it sounds like something that would appeal to you, like if you like stories about also motherhood, because it explores motherhood a little bit, I still feel that this could be interesting. But ultimately, yes, it wasn't one of my favorites by him. I was meant to talk about this book in the beginning, but I forgot, which is a DNF for me, the DNF of the month, I would say. And it was The Child's Brain Explained to Parents by Álvaro Bilbao. I have the Italian edition, but it was originally written in Spanish, and I believe, I'm pretty sure there is an English translation, and I was very excited to get to this one because it talks about children's brain, and that's a very interesting topic to me, for me, especially at the moment. But I think I got through the introduction and maybe a couple of times, maybe it could have been only the introduction, to be honest. And I didn't really like his stance towards, first of all, there are no footnotes, no quotes or anything whatsoever. There is no bibliography, anything. And to be a book that talks about research, that's just very lacking, and I just cannot stand it when the book says something like, this study says this and that, and then they don't even reference to the study in question, to the research. This research shows, but what research? Give me receipts, you know? So I don't like that. And also it implied, like the author implied multiple times that sort of neurodiversity, especially he talks about ADHD, and since I am ADHD, I'm very sensitive to the topic because I'm also very much informed on it, and he sort of says that how like putting children in front of a screen sort of might help develop ADHD, which is complete bullshit, because even though I can agree with him to not put like very young children on a TV screen, like do not let them watch like a lot of TV when their brains are still developing, and especially when they're very, very young, and there is research on that. There is no evidence that claims that could bring ADHD. On the contrary, ADHD is a neurobiological condition and you're born with it. So there is no TV that can give you ADHD. And after saying that like a couple of times, I just couldn't, like, how can I take seriously what the author has to say? And I don't even know whether I should give this book away or just, I don't know, burn it, because I don't want anybody to come across this information and think that it is correct, because it is not. So I don't really know what to do with this book, to be honest. And the last book that I'm going to talk about very quickly, because I'm already very late, is the only book that I read in April, because all the other books I read in March, which is Lowborn by Kerry Hudson. I gave it 4 stars. It's a memoir about the author going back to the places she used to live in Scotland and England, I mean in the UK, back when she was with her single mother, and they lived in extreme poverty, and they changed many sort of housing places. How growing up and becoming what she became now, she was sort of able to, and it was very hard for her to go back to those places and to the life that she sort of tried to forget for a big portion of her life. But for her, it's sort of a cathartic experience to go back to those places and actually remembering things, and also discovering new things that she didn't know about her, like reading the records, the documents. So it was very fascinating to go into this emotional journey with her, because I just felt like hugging her, and because she sounds like a very great, like genuinely good person that went through a lot, but she was also able to lift her chin up and just be proud of who she is without having to erase the past, and just embracing what she was, and how what she was made her into what she is now. So I think it's extremely interesting and very well written, and it sort of is, there's like sort of a dual timeline, one in the past when she talks about her as a young girl, and one in the present where she goes to the location and she sort of talks about her feelings toward the place and toward the people that are still living there, and probably most of them still live in extreme poverty as she did. What she can do to help bring the issue up front. So yeah, this one was very, very good, and I sort of missed reading memoirs. I love reading memoirs, and I should definitely pick up more of these. That's it for today. I'm sorry if I was a bit rushed in the end, but I'm trying to squeeze in everything. As I already said, I hope you enjoyed, and please let me know your thoughts on the books that I talked about, if you read any of them, if you have any suggestion for me, and let's chat in the comments, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!